Welcome to Working Class Hollywood, conversations with people that make the movies, TV shows, and entertainment you love. If you're looking to break into or move up in the entertainment industry, or you're just a fan of content and want to hear about how it's made, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Jeremiah Smith.
It's my job to handpick the brightest and best comedians and find out who's ready for television and figuring out and surrounding them with the right people to get their voice and put them in the best vehicle for their talents on television.
My guest today is Adam Londy. Adam is the Vice President of Talent and Development at Comedy Central. He oversees shows like The Jim Jefferies Show, Corporate, and a new show that Adam developed for the network starring Aquafina. Adam talks a lot about how they develop shows at Comedy Central, how they identify comics early on in their career, and the steps that they take through the years in order to get them on a show on the network. Adam has a great story of how he came up, starting as an agent's assistant, then working for Marty Bowen at Temple Hill, which is a very successful film production house. Adam, being a Vanderpump Rules superfan, turns the questioning on me, and we talk a lot about Vanderpump as well. And, he asks all his burning questions of how we make that show. Adam is a very smart guy. He's very charismatic. I really enjoyed sitting down with him, and I think you are going to enjoy my chat with Adam Londy. All right, I'm here with Adam Londy, Vice President of Talent and Development at Comedy Central. How's it going, Adam?
It's going well. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
We're in Adam's offices at Comedy Central in Hollywood, which are I think I told you this on the elevator right up, but I actually interned at Comedy Central in 2002. I figured out.
So that was
year.
probably before Workaholics.
Yeah, it was like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. I think maybe Chappelle Show was in like development.
Probably was in development.
What year did he like peace out to Africa? I don't remember. That was a thing. It was either on TV or in development.
Was there a pilot or a script that you like read or watched as an intern that like was either passed on or made on television that you're like you now look back on and you're like, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. No, I did. I used to be like a huge comedy nerd, and so working at Comedy Central, it's like, I wasn't even getting paid, but like just being in that building was like just the biggest thing in my life. I'm trying to remember something that I read or watched. It was so long ago, and I have a horrible memory. I do have. This is my. I do have a story from that job that I like to tell. So I was like 20 years old in college, and I was an intern, and the head of the network at the time was Lauren Creo. I don't know if she's still around.
She runs Michael Eisner's like Toronto now.
Okay. All right. So she was running Comedy Central, and her assistant was like the coordinator of like the office and the intern program, whatever. And so whenever she was out, either at a meeting or for lunch, I would like cover her desk and answer phones. So I was sitting at...
Which is scary for an intern.
Yeah.
Phones are terrifying.
Yeah, they were. And I was sitting at the desk, and it was like lunchtime, so it was pretty quiet. And I was reading Bernie Brillstein's biography, who's like a old school like comedy manager that's passed away. But so I was reading his book, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and like Lauren Creo's office. It's like, hi, I've got Bernie Brillstein for Lauren Creo. And I was like, what? Like this, like mind explodes. Like this, like I'm in Hollywood, man. This is awesome. But yeah, that's one of the. I don't remember scripts I read, but I remember.
No, that's a great memory.
Bernie Brillstein.
No, I worked at CA, which we'll get to in a second, and I lied on my resume to get that job, and my boss at the time repped Simon Cowell in the heyday of American Idol, and the first person who called. I was like, please don't let it be Simon Cowell. It was Simon Cowell.
It's terrifying dealing with like famous people, right? When you're like young and you don't know what to do. Let's get into your story. So where are you from originally, and how did you end up in LA?
So I grew up in northern New Jersey, Ridgewood.
Okay.
And then my parents were like, what's the most traumatic thing we can do to Adam? Let's move him to Orange County, California at 13, right after my bar mitzvah. And luckily I have an older sister who was like, you need to quit playing the trombone in the band and you need to start listening to like punk music and skateboarding if you want to fit in.
You could have played the trombone in a ska band.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's Orange County ska bands like Less Than Jake or Mighty Mighty Bosstones.
You're talking my language right now. That's what I grew up with.
But no, so I moved to Orange County, California. And so I feel like my formative years were spent there. And, I went to high school there.
What part of Orange County?
Mission Viejo.
Okay.
So southern.
Yep.
And then I stayed local for a girlfriend at the time, and so I went to Chapman University. And Chapman it's a really great film school now, but at the time it was where you went when you couldn't get into USC or UCLA, and my grades were crap.
Yeah. And so what did you study in Chapman?
Film, television production.
Okay, so you did their film
and then I
school.
minored in advertising.
Nice.
And I think, I always knew I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. Like on my 13th birthday, my parents bought me like a video camera, and for my bar mitzvah, I was like reading Sidney Lumet's like making movies. And so I was always kind of like a film TV geek.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know. Like I had read a bunch of books, but I never really knew like what the entertainment industry was. And even coming out of film school, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. Like I was a writing, directing, like kind of major. But everything I wrote was like shit. It was really angsty. I was watching a lot of like Dawson's Creek at the time. But
I used to have viewing parties I'm not kidding. Me and my guy friends would have viewing parties for Dawson's Creek like every Tuesday night.
I wish we were friends at the time.
It
I would have
sounds like
come.
we could have been.
Yeah. Were you? Now this is a really important question. Are you team Dawson or team Pacey?
Oh, dude, team Pacey all the way.
See, I'm Dawson, and I feel like if you're a film TV nerd, like Dawson is speaking your language.
See, I kind of found that aspect of his character like a little obnoxious. Like he's like so into film, and he had like like Spielberg posters on his walls or whatever. Like I thought Pacey was the more like down to earth, like had his head like not as far up his ass.
Well, he had the
Dawson.
much better storylines. Like
Yeah.
he had the juicy stuff, like the affair with his teacher and all of that.
You want to know a fun fact about me?
And then I have a fun fact about Dawson's Creek that I'm going to tell you.
Okay. So there's a couple like name drops that I could do.
Please.
I actually was teenage friends with Michelle Williams, who was on Dawson's Creek.
Yes.
And we kissed during a game of Spin the Bottle. At this, we were both in this like theater group in San Diego, so we're like up on the mountain in an amphitheater behind the stage playing Spin the Bottle.
That sounds very romantic.
We were like 15 or whatever, and yeah, I kissed Michelle Williams.
And do you think if you ran into her now, she would remember you?
I don't know.
She seems pretty down to earth.
No, she was always super cool. We called her Shelly back then. Like she went by Shelly, and like we would go to like her house. She lived in like Del Mar or like the Northern County. I really wonder. I bet maybe if I like had a few minutes to explain to her, like, do you remember like the Russell? Yeah, okay. So I was the guy that like she came to my house one time, like my little shitty like Lemon Grove, California house. I think we gave each other back rubs on our beds, like it's like so like
yeah.
maybe like
no,
maybe,
I think she'd remember you.
Maybe I would be really curious actually. So if Michelle Williams, if you're listening, she's not.
Call
listening.
me. It's funny. I actually got suspended from Newhart Middle School because of Dawson's Creek. I used to tape it, and I would try to watch it live, but if I missed it, I'd tape it
on
VCR. Yeah, VCR.
Yeah.
And so the episode where Pacey like seals the deal with his teacher, I missed it, and it's appointment viewing at that time. So I brought it. We had in my homeroom class, we had a substitute teacher because my teacher had been out that week, and so I tricked her into thinking that watching this VHS was part of the curriculum. And parents complained.
Sure.
And I got suspended. But you know what? I caught up on Dawson's Creek while I was in homeroom, and so I considered a win. And also, the ladies in my class thought that was baller of me.
Dude, a straight guy that's like into Dawson's Creek.
I'm in touch with my feelings.
Like, yeah, that's
between that and the emo music I was listening to. I was very in touch with my feelings.
So how did you? So you went to Chapman.
I went to Chapman University, and I think Chapman. Now it has great alumni relations. I think at the time it was still the old film school before like the big endowment, and so it was really like make of it what you will. Like I was just always a go-getter, and so I felt like the proximity to Hollywood, I needed to take advantage of it. So, listening to, I think, the Zach Olin, where you guys were talking about the Hollywood Creative Directory at the time, like LinkedIn wasn't a thing. Email was a thing, obviously. But, what I did was I would buy like episodes, like issues of the Hollywood Reporter and see what like shows are in production. And I would write handwritten letters, basically to like writers on my favorite shows, Dawson's Creek or the OC at the time. And just basically write handwritten letters, like very specific of like episodes that they wrote or like why the show was important to me, asking if there was any internships that I could have. And so basically I wrote probably like over 200 letters.
Oh my God.
And probably 3 people responded to me.
Wow.
But I mean, the 3 people who did respond to me, like I'm forever grateful, and like that sticks with you.
Yeah.
But so I interned, I had a couple internships while I was in college. I would try to intern like during the summer and then like during the winter. And so I interned at like MTV in the Santa Monica offices. But the internship that I think was the most beneficial to me was there was this like kind of like old school director producer named Irwin Winkler. Mm-hmm. And he produced like The Right Stuff and Goodfellas and like all the Rocky movies. And so like legendary movies. And so like he had a small office in Beverly Hills, and he had just directed Life is a House at the time. And was doing this movie called Home of the Brave with like Jessica Biel and like 50 Cent. And so it was a very small office. And so like writing to them about like, the importance of the Rocky movies, and like Irwin Winkler is this like incredible, like, legendary producer. I don't think they've ever received that. So they were like, yes, please come. And so I interned at the office, and it was quiet. So I just read a bunch of scripts, but at the time they were going into production on Rocky Balboa.
Nice.
And so like, as an East Coast kid at heart, like working on a Rocky movie was just like, holy crap. And so I got to PA on Rocky Balboa. And so I worked, we shot at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, which was awesome. And Philadelphia and Los Angeles. And so I PA'd on set for the whole movie. And that was like my like really like opened up my eyes to like what all the different positions do. And I knew that I didn't want to be a PA, but
sure.
But it was incredible experience.
That's amazing.
I mean, it was a grueling and crazy experience.
What were you doing as a set PA on that movie?
I mean, set PA was just basically like, I was working mainly with the producers. So like it was just getting them coffee every day, or like, making sure to pick them up at their hotel room, or make sure they knew where they needed to go, or like, if like Sylvester Stallone's TV wasn't working in his trailer, like going to fix it, just things like that. And I think, for me, I was like bright-eyed and bushy. Like my eyes were so wide. Like it was just so exciting to be on set, especially a Rocky movie, that like I was just eager. Like no job was too small, and like I just was willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I was the same way. Like the first time I got onto a set for like a real job, I think it was when I started.
What was your first on-set experience?
Like where I was actually working there, not just like, because I started out in the office. So I was like an agent's assistant, and then I was a development assistant at ABC. But then once I started doing reality production, I think my first like real on-set experience was Cupcake Wars for Food Network. I was like the associate producer. As
much as I love Vanderpump Rules, which I'm sure we'll touch upon in a bit, Food Network is also like my kryptonite. Like my wife and I like fall asleep every night watching like the Barefoot Contessa and like Diners, Drive-Ins and Dives. Like love Food Network. So, but
awesome.
And I am a big fan of Cupcake Wars.
Yeah, it was fun. I think they're still making it too. I think they're making have all these like different iterations. I know they have like Halloween Wars and Christmas Wars. I think they did a kids version.
Yeah.
So it's like that show is just like it's gone on. But so I was like the associate producer of Cupcake Wars season 2, and I mean, if I were to have that job now, it would be like a miserable experience. The hours were insane. Like the producers would show up at like 5:30 in the mornings. We had to like meet the contestants and help them load into the stage and walk them through the kitchen, because then filming started at like 7:30, and then you'd wrap filming at like 8 or 8:30, and then we had to stay to get all the contestants. So it was like working like 5:30 to like 11:30 at night, and then you'd like do it all over again the next day. But at the time, I was like, this is the best experience of my life. Like I felt like I was at summer camp, and just like I was having a ball.
Well, I think also like being a PA, like it's humbling, obviously, but also like same thing with like agency experience, which we'll get to in a second. Like you really see like how the top like sets the tone for the whole set. Like,
Yeah.
if it's all assholes at the top, like it's gonna, trickles down. It's gonna be miserable. So it's like it really also teaches you like if you ever do get to the position of like being the boss, like how you need to treat people.
Yeah.
But like that set, as you can imagine, where there were big personalities, and it was like, I mean, after a while, it wore on you.
Yeah.
But it was still an incredible experience. And so did that, and I actually got offered a job to go PA on Home of the Brave, which was Irwin's next movie, which was going to shoot in Morocco. But it was basically I would have to miss the last semester of my senior year in college.
Oh, you were still in school.
I was still in school, yeah. I was basically driving up to Los Angeles from Orange County, which that 405 could be like 3-hour drive.
Oh, yeah.
I was doing it 3 days a week.
Wow.
And so I politely declined. I mean, it was an incredible experience, but I was like, I need to finish school and then move up to LA. And I think, as soon as I graduated, the day I graduated, I moved to LA, because I think moving to Los Angeles is half the battle. Because like, as you probably know, like getting your first job, like someone's sick or someone quits for another job, and like they need someone who can interview that day.
Yeah.
And it's like, driving up the 405, I'm like, I needed to be there.
Yeah. Most Hollywood jobs are not like corporate jobs that have like 6-month lead times with multiple rounds of interviews. It's like, holy shit, we need someone on set tomorrow. Like, find them quick.
Yes. And so moved to LA, and that was half the battle. And then, I then because I really didn't know many people. Like I'm Orange County is its own bubble. So like I didn't really know people in the industry at the time. So basically, as I was interning at all these places, I just kept in contact. I wasn't annoying about it, but just like, hey, I saw that, MTV's premiering this show, looks great, congratulations. Or, Irwin, I saw he set up this movie at this studio, congratulations, sounds awesome. I remember reading that script. And so, and then also called upon like the 3 people who responded to my query letters, my handwritten letters. And so through that's ultimately what like landed me my first job, like my first set of interviews, and ultimately my job at CAA. But we could go for hours on like stories of like first interviews and like in Hollywood, because like there's some legendary interviews I had. But
what's the best one? The
two best ones are I interviewed for a producer's assistant job, and at the time he's a pretty well-known producer, so I'm not going to say his name.
Sure.
But during the interview, the second question he asked me was, if it's 3 a.m. and I call you and my dog shit on my carpet, what would you do? And I said, I would roll over and go back to sleep. And he did not like that answer. So I did not get that job. And then the other like memorable interview I had was, and I've talked to a lot of people who've interviewed with this guy, but at William Morris Agency, before it was William Morris Endeavor, there was this HR exec, or like, HR guy who like was notorious for just like being a complete asshole, and I think like was like miserable with his lot in life. And like, so during his interview, he wore his sunglasses, he would not take his sunglasses off, and answered his phone, or I think it was like his pager at the time, like no more than like 7 times during the interview. And like at some point you're just like, I don't want this job. Like, I want this job, but I don't. Like, it was so ridiculous.
I love the like douchey Hollywood stereotypes that like coming true.
He had frosted tips, which took me back to my days in Orange County. But no, I mean, it was like the not taking your sunglasses off, like, was just like an ultimate like dick move.
Oh my God.
Well, do you have an interview story of like?
I kind of like would interview and get stuff. I don't mean like to like toot my own horn, but like I feel
like
you
have Michelle Williams. I mean,
yeah. Like, should I start dropping more names? I do have a funny story from when I quit my agency job. It's because I was an agent's assistant for 2 years. That was my last internship while I was at UCLA. I pushed the mail cart 3 days a week at UTA. And so
do you remember Marty Bowen?
Yeah.
So I worked for him at Temple Hill, which we'll get to.
Okay, all right, yeah.
There's some like great stories about Marty Bowen and like the mail room and like cutting people's ties off and stuff like that.
Dude, it's like a fraternity, and I got screamed at, I got hazed, I got shit thrown at my face.
Was there a cool delivery that you had to do in the mailroom? Like,
oh yeah, tons of them. Like I went to Justin Timberlake's house. I would go to sets of like, you know, like UTA repped like a lot of comics and stuff. And they repped like all the actors from that 70s show. So I'd get to go like hang out on the set of that 70s show, like when they taped Friday nights and stuff. But I did that I interned like for the summer, and then I got on a desk and I was an assistant for 2 years.
Whose desk were you on?
I started on Ruth Ann Secunda's desk. Is she still an agent?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that name in a while, but I know that like when I was on Marty's desk, they had talked occasionally.
Yeah, she was big in her day. And then I worked for Shani Rosenzweig, who's a feature talent agent, and she's still at UTA. She's a partner there now. And she's amazing. I'm trying to get her on this podcast. She's like,
I've heard nothing but great things.
She's the best. Like, she's super smart. She's super funny.
Incredible clients too.
Yeah, she's great clients. She's I really loved working for her, but I realized I didn't want to be an agent, and so I quit. And I went down. They had a similar like HR person. I think his name's Michael Conway. Who could still be there? I have no idea. He was great. He was not an asshole. He was kind of this like very like kind of stiff, pretentious gay man, but he was like very friendly, but like, you know, kind of like Hollywood in his own way, wore like very fancy suits. And I went in and I sat in his desk, across from his desk, and I was like, Michael, I got to tell you, I got to put in my 2 weeks notice. I'm going to go traveling. I took like a gap year basically. And I just realized this isn't for me. And he just looks at me and he starts laughing. He's like, like, what's funny? He's like, Jeremiah, I've seen people come and I've seen people go, and you are a fucking agent. You'll be back, my friend. And I was like, okay. I never went back. I think I could have, and I guess do you look that good in a suit? Is that dude, my suits were awful. Like the huge baggy pants, like just like, off the rack, like horrible suits. But I think that like had I wanted to, I could have stayed there and probably gotten promoted and become an agent. And I think I probably would have been good had I decided that that's what I wanted to do. But I don't know. I didn't want it's such a lifestyle for those guys, and I'm a fan of agents. Like people talk a lot of shit about agents. I think that they're some of the smartest, hardest working people in this business,
for sure.
But I also saw people get like really like knocked down. Some agents with like clients leaving them, or just like the competitiveness within the agency. And I was like, I don't know if I just want to go down this route. So
so my first official job was at CAA, and I worked in alternative television, and I worked for like two just like really nice young agents.
Who did you work for?
I worked for Joe Labraccio, who was at UTA and now is at Condé Nast, I believe. And then this other agent, Andrea Ross, who I don't know if she's still in the industry, but both of them were lovely. They like Joe was more like selling formats, like international formats here. And then Andrea was more like, like Juliana Rancic, like Simon Cowell, like personalities. And so, I was in alternative TV, and I used that basically as just an opportunity. Cause I think like, you can read the mailroom and you hear horror stories, but like, honestly, I am the biggest believer that like starting an agency is the most important thing, just because like some of my closest friends now are still like, people I met as an assistant at like CAA.
Yeah.
And like, I think also coming here, you don't really know what an agent does, what a manager does, what a network executive does. And so like you kind of learn how an agency is the hub, like everything comes and goes through the agency, and also like what everyone does. And so like I saw it as almost like grad school where they pay you very little.
Yeah.
And the way I used it, and is basically I would get my hands on like all the hot spec scripts. And it was interesting because like at that time, like, and I think up until like about 7 years ago, like TV was like the redheaded ugly stepchild. Like you had to be in features or television. You couldn't do both. And so I was in television, and like features was like, MP Lit was like this, like the holy grail of sorts. But so I would get my hands on like hot spec scripts that sold. And I think my favorite thing to do, and kind of the way that I like tried to hone my taste or like understand what a difference between a good script and a bad script is like read a script or like read a TV pilot, and then like go see the movie or watch the pilot like that's produced. And if I love the script and I hated the movie or I hated the TV pilot, like why did I, was it the directing, was it the casting, and like trying to like really like compartmentalize like what each department did and like who shit the bed.
Right.
And I think like for me like there's some scripts that I love that like I saw, you know, like I saw the movie got made like 6 years later and I'm like, this is why it was really difficult to get made. And like, here's why it should have never been made. And like, I think the one script shows how angsty I was that I read on that desk was like a hot spec script was like 500 Days of Summer.
Yeah.
Like that was the one that was being passed around. And like I was going through like a bad breakup at the time, so like that script like spoke to me.
Was that on like the Blacklist or something?
It was. Like, you know, it's interesting. The Blacklist is really funny because I think the Blacklist. There's some wonderful scripts that have been on the Blacklist, but like I think now people write to like the biopic that can be on the Blacklist.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of executives use the Blacklist as a way to like not do their homework, of like not read. Like it's a way to sell to your boss. Like they were on the Blacklist. So they've been on the Blacklist this many times. Or like, you know, when I worked as a producer at Temple Hill, which we'll get to, like, you know, be able to go to like Fox or like the exec and go like, well, they've been on the Blacklist and they're, you know, and,
right.
and they're like, oh, well, we got to get them
Blacklist.
for this open writing assignment. But I, you know, I do think like I can't stress the importance, because I think like then my next assistant job.
How long were you at CAA?
I was at CAA for a year.
A year,
like I
okay.
knew I didn't want to be an agent. Like I had the same suit. I would just swap out the ties. Like I think at the time, like I didn't have thick skin. Like I was a baby. Like I was very sensitive. Like if things said to me, I couldn't let them roll off my back. And I think that's super important as an agent and in the entertainment industry as well.
Yeah.
Like with big personalities. And so like I felt like leaving the talent agency, like I needed my experience, like my entourage moment of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need to go work for like my RE.
Yeah. You wanted something harder?
I did
because
like
your bosses were too nice.
They were too. I mean, and I love that. Like I don't think if I had a boss who screamed at me or threw things at me, I probably would have left the industry.
Yeah.
Just because I was a baby. Like so I think.
See, I had the reverse experience.
Oh, really?
Like I was like hazed, and I like really I had to grow a thick skin at the agency because people were like brutal, and not even necessarily my bosses. It was like the other agents that just loved, for whatever reason, just loved picking on other assistants, like loved picking on me. Yeah, and I just like I had to just laugh at it, you know, because it's like what else are you gonna do?
Yeah,
you know?
No, I feel like if I had that experience, and I think if I was in the mailroom, because like when I worked at CA, like you could get on a desk. Like now you have to be in the mailroom for a certain amount of time, then you have to float, and then you get a desk. Like it's very rare to just go in and get a desk the way I did. If I was pushing mail and like being hazed, I would have went home to my parents and cried.
Back to OC.
Yeah.
Put on some old Dawson's Creek episodes.
Dashboard confessional and cry in my childhood bedroom.
See, I actually loved the mailroom. Like I would, because I'm just like naturally chatty, so I would like push the cart and stop at every single assistant's desk and like chat them up and everything. I'm sure they were like, get this fucking intern away from me. I'm trying to do work. But like, I don't know. I liked it.
So then from CA, because I basically, you know, like used it as like my training ground, grad school, get out. So after my year, and I was very like I lied to get the job and said to like the HR that I wanted to be an agent, but like to the agents that to HR, but like when I was sitting down with them, I was like, hey, I don't want to be an agent.
But that's totally fine. I don't think, and that's a great way to use your agency experience, is to like get it, learn from it, and then use it to like catapult you to something else. And then that culture that's there, they're not expecting every assistant that comes to the door to like be promoted to agent.
But I do wish, because I worked in alternative TV, and like that was around the heyday of like American Idol, and it was like just when like the Bravo wasn't the like Bravo that it is today.
Right.
But like I kind of like being in alternative TV, like I hadn't yet really found like my love of reality television. And I feel like if I had, maybe I would have probably gone into reality TV.
Just you now would have been like all over
I mean, it's
that
literally like my dream job is what you do, or like a Bravo like executive. Like, I mean, my wife is in drama and I'm obviously working comedy. So like all we do is watch Bravo. Because like when we come home, I think like we're so used to like assess it, like, she reads drama scripts, I read comedy, and like thinking and like doing notes, and like, so to turn off our brain a little bit, it's just Bravo is like the perfect, that and Food Network are like the perfect thing to just turn on at night.
Yeah.
And then like you tune in to just turn off, and then you like fall in love with these larger than life characters, and you can't, then you're down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching. So after CA you went to...
So after CA, and this is really long winded, but like I went to work for a director briefly who was going to be on a studio movie, and so I was going to be a director's assistant. Because at that point I still didn't. I knew I wanted to produce, but I still didn't really quite know what a producer did. Mm-hmm. And so I went to work for a director briefly, and I was going to be his on-set assistant, and then he fell off the movie, and so I was his personal assistant for like 4 months. But it was like working out of his house, and great, very talented director. But I knew this wasn't like what I wanted to do, and so and he was also a really nice guy. So I was like, I need my RE. So then I interviewed with Marty Bowen.
Yes.
And so Marty had just left UTA and partnered with Wick Godfrey, who was a producer on for Davis Entertainment on the Fox lot, and they had just done Nativity Story. So this is before all the Twilight movies. Mm-hmm. And so, Marty, he is quoted. A lot of his stories are in the like mailroom, the book.
Yeah. No, that guy's a big personality.
He's a legend. And I mean, I think when I went to work for him, he like had met his now wife, mother of his children. Like he had been tame, like he was tame compared to what I think his wild days at UTA, which he still brags about.
When I was there, he was like really hard on people. I don't know if I'd go so far to say he was a dick, but like his assistant was this guy Adam. I remember
Adam Weinstein,
yeah, and Adam Weinstein is like the nicest guy, and he would just get punished.
Well, if you
every
heard
day.
Adam Weinstein, I can't tell because there's so much lore about like the Marty Bowen assistants, but like the legendary Adam Weinstein story is the fact that Marty bought a Porsche. And Adam Weinstein's job was to mail in the insurance, and he forgot to, and Marty crashed his car. I didn't know and so like basically like his insurance didn't cover the totaled Porsche that he had, and like it was Adam Weinstein's fault. And Adam Weinstein didn't get fired, which is incredible. But that's a funny Marty Bowen story and Adam Weinstein story that I like to hear.
So do you know Adam?
Yeah.
Where is he now?
He's at Verve. He's a partner at Verve.
Okay. Good for him.
He's one of the greatest guys.
He's so. I mean, we like played softball together and like went to Vegas together.
But like him and then Rebecca Ewing, who was at UTA, like was his assistant after Adam, and like
I remember her.
Basically, like they were like you don't even know what you had. But so when I went to interview with Marty, he likes to test people in the room. Like everything in that job was like a test. Like you want to be a producer, you need to get stuff done. Like everything was like impossible, like giving me an impossible task to test me to see if I can do it. But
you were his assistant.
Well, so I interviewed to be his assistant, and in the interview, he was picking apart my resume. He was like, I put a semicolon here. I would have like omit this special skill. And I was like, this guy's a dick. And I was like, I don't think I want this job. And so basically we had like an hour and a half meeting, and I left it. I'm like, maybe I'm not quite ready to work for someone like with this big of a personality. And so, I can't believe I'm saying this on the podcast, but I will. So he had me cover a script as like a lot of like before you get a job as an assistant, a lot of like bosses will make you cover scripts to make sure you actually can write and read.
Right. And if anyone listening doesn't know what that means, basically you read the script and you have to write like a summary and your opinion on it.
Yeah. And like agencies, like a lot of agents like or studio executives who don't have time to read a script or a book, like they use the coverage as a way to like act like they read it.
Yeah.
And so Marty had me cover a script, and so basically what I did was take CA's coverage of that script and put my own name on it. And I just sent it to him, and I was like, I don't want this job. It doesn't matter. And so the next day he called me, Marty, and he was like, that's some of the best coverage I've ever read. And I said, I have to be honest, like I don't think we're the right fit. Like, and also that was CA's coverage. And I put
just told him straight up.
And dead silence, and then all of a sudden there was like a slow clap, like on the other end of the line. And Marty was like, you have to come work for me now. Like that's so brilliant that you did that. Like, and I was just like, okay. And so I went to work for him and I was his assistant for 2 years. And I mean, he kicked my ass, but in the best way possible. I mean, like he gave me, Marty is, you know, he's brilliant at what he does. He's a bull, like, you know, like he's just like a bulldozer in a china shop. Like he will not stop until he sells a movie or gets a movie made. And so just like watching him work was incredible. And Wick is, you know, now the president of Paramount. And like the two of them together were like powerhouse producers and just like the best guys.
Yeah.
And like, I think in Hollywood, you know, the days of like assholes like has gone, which is great. But like, you know, Marty and Wick actually cared about the people they like worked for them. So, you know, like with Marty, like he wanted me to be on set. Like I got to be on set for Dear John in like Charleston, South Carolina for 4 months. And like, you know, he's the kind of guy like who actually like they care and they want to see you succeed. And like, you know, from Dear John, I became really close with Channing Tatum and Jamie Linden, who wrote the movie. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Channing on Dear John had just basically skipped his high school reunion because he had like a serious long-term girlfriend and he wanted like to remember his classmates the way they treated him then before like he was a big star. And so Jamie Linden and Scott Porter, who was also in the movie from Friday Night Lights, had just gone to their high school reunion. And so Jamie was like, I want to write like a Big Chill-esque movie. And Channing was like, I'm in. And so like basically this movie was like built on the set of Dear John. And so I had been like on set for like a couple of the Twilight movies and Dear John. And so when we got back from Dear John, this movie 10 Years, which no one saw, but it like credible cast like Chris Pratt, Oscar Isaac, like Channing Tatum, like the poster is actually right there.
Oh, look, there it is.
Rosario Dawson.
Look at young Channing Tatum.
Yeah, Justin Long, like incredible cast. And so Marty was like, you know, you want to produce? Like you're off my desk, go produce this movie. And so after 2 years, he promoted me.
What?
Yeah, and I got to go. We shot that movie in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Dude, that's awesome.
And so it was great. So it, you know, it was a great experience. So I was at Temple Hill for 6 years, and you know, I learned so much. And I think, you know, what I got frustrated with in the feature world was like how long development actually took.
Yeah.
Like you would sell a project with like an attachment, which means like you'd get a celebrity attached to your script. And then like a year later, that celebrity doesn't mean anything. And the movie's put in turnaround, which means the studio's not going to make it. And like someone else can buy the script. And so like, I was just getting really frustrated. Like I got 2 or 3 movies made while I was at Temple Hill, which is great. But like, I was just getting bored with the pace. And so at the time, you know, Temple Hill hadn't really done any television. And so there were all these like busted feature scripts or like books that we got the rights to that never really went anywhere. And so I just started playing around and like taking meetings and sold a couple TV projects, like hour long, and I always gravitated more towards comedy. And like, I think Temple Hill, they have like the YA genre down and like the weepy Nicholas Sparks romances. And like, I think that appeals to like the old angsty Adam. But like for me, I always really gravitated towards like comedies. And like, I grew up watching Comedy Central. And so, you know, I think to be a really successful producer, you kind of need to understand the business aspect of the job. Like, you know, movie making and TV making, as much as it's like an escape, is a business. Like you need to sell advertisement, you need to sell Slim Jims in your like you basically need to make money to sustain it, like, you know, keeping a show on the network. And so like, you know, for me, dealing with like S&P and like ad sales and all of that, like it was foreign to me. And I think as a well-rounded producer, you need to understand like how that works and the business aspect of it. So, you know, I had sold a couple features or TV, you know, pilots, but I was like, I need experience on the buying side. And so I felt like I had alternative television experience, minimal at CAA. I had worked in like weepy drama, but I hadn't had experience comedy. And like, I looked at a place where like at Temple Hill, we were all about IP, like books to film or books like, and I was like, well, where can I be useful? And I think Comedy Central was a brand that I was super passionate about, but also a brand that uses comedians as IP, where like, if you look at a lot of the shows that are on the network, like they have the comedian's name in the title. And so like very much in the way that like, you know, the hot Twilight book series, like, like who's the comedian that I want to be in business with. But I will say the final nail in the coffin, which I think you'll appreciate at Temple Hill, when I knew I just needed to get out, that I'd been at Temple Hill for too long, 6 years, was, Twilight like the 50 Shades of Grey books started as like Twilight fan fiction.
Right.
I don't know if
I know.
Did you read?
No, I didn't read 50 Shades. My wife read all the 50 Shades books and told me all about them.
So when there was the big the books being sold for the film rights being sold, like all these producers wanted to put their hat in the ring. And Marty and Wick, obviously it's a big business. Like, of course we wanted to be in the E.L. James business, but Stephenie Meyer is so, so sacred over the books. And like, Stephenie Meyer's the writer of the Twilight movies.
Right.
It's such an important relationship that she basically was like to Marty and Wick, I prefer that you not put your hat in the ring to produce these movies.
Oh, interesting.
So, Marty and Wick, of course, didn't want to do anything to sabotage our relationship. But at the time, Marty tasked me with finding the next great piece of erotic fiction. And so basically, I was in my studio apartment in WeHo at the time, and I was just broken up with. You're sensing a theme? And so I basically had to go home this weekend that I'd just been brutally dumped in my studio apartment and read like 9 different like erotic fiction, like Bared to You, Cross, like The Marriage Bargain, like all these really terrible like book series that were going to be published or like, self-published. And I was just like sitting there like wanting to like blow my brains out, like reading all this erotic fiction. But like, I will say this, it came in handy because like, like around the Twilight, like around the like 50 Shades of Grey, like Christmas time, like I would go to like, my girlfriend's house, or I'd be with my parents, and I'd be able to talk to all those shows, like books intelligently. My mom would be like, I didn't read the 50 Shades, or my sister was like, I read 50 Shades and I liked it. I was like, oh, you need to read Bared to You net. Like I knew the erotic fiction, like I knew what like the gateway erotic fiction and where they should ultimately end up. But at that time I was like, I'm not passionate about erotic fiction. Like, I am a hopeless romantic from my days of listening to emo music, but I want to be in comedy. And so that's when I chased the dream of being a network executive at Comedy Central.
Well, I feel like after the world hears this, your wife is going to have to work very hard to keep you on lockdown, because women everywhere are going to be like, I want a guy that washes Dawson's Creeks and reads erotic fiction.
So did you ever dip your toes into that at all?
So here's my embarrassing book confession. So when I was I think I was in elementary school, maybe middle school, there's a series of books called The Babysitter's Club.
Who doesn't love the Babysitter's
Club?
Dude,
I was obsessed with the Babysitter's.
Really? Apple, yeah.
I read like all the Babysitter Club books, and like my bookshelf was just full like 1 through like 62 plus all the like holiday special books. Like I was like obsessed. I used to imagine.
Did you have siblings?
I had a younger sister and a younger brother.
So were they hurt, or they were yours?
No. They were mine. I don't know how I got into them, but then
did you try to pass them off to your friends as your little sisters? Or?
Well, at the time, I didn't know that was embarrassing, I think. So now I tell people, and they find it hilarious that like this young little boy was reading.
No, I mean, I would read like Saved by the Bell is like my ultimate.
Yeah,
that and
same.
That and Vanderpump Rules.
Okay. The fact that you just put Vanderpump Rules in the same class as Saved by the Bell is like really flattering.
Well,
to me.
it's like the Saved by the Bell kids gone bad in a way. That's the way I see it. That's why I love it so much. But Saved by the Bell, like I would read, like I would buy like all the like. There were like books, like novels based on like Saved by the Bell, and like I'd buy like the like Tiger Beat, like for like the posters of like all the Saved by the Bell, like, and I'd be like, I mean, it didn't even faze me, but I'm like, I would buy Tiger Beat for those like for the Dawson's Creek posters. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I was in touch with my sexuality.
Yeah, dude. I think we're on the same page.
We are.
We're both married to women now,
exactly.
Dude. Like it worked.
We would have been best friends.
I think so.
Although I never played Spin the Bottle with any famous actresses. Sadly.
Well, we can all dream. Maybe that's in your future still.
No. I'm a happily married man.
You got to have your hall pass though, right? Like if you were at a party and like some like really famous actress was like, you guys, we're playing Spin the Bottle.
We're getting into dangerous territory.
Be like,
here.
Just look at your wife and be like, come on, honey. I mean, how are you going to pass that up? Anyway, so you were getting out of Temple Hill. You wanted to get in TV. You wanted your experience as a buyer. What's interesting to me about the way that you're talking about your career is it seems like, you are sort of like being the architect of your career. Like you're not just like following doors as they open. You're like, I need an experience to like get a thicker skin.
I know where I want to ultimately be. And so now at least I've had enough experience or like been around enough jobs where I know like what I need to fill in the gaps. Like, you know, cause like now I ultimately want to produce television. Like I want to go back to producing.
Okay.
I think, you know, being a network executive is an incredible job. But it's also a heartbreaking job. I think 99% of my job and my day is saying no to people, including some of my best friends. And so like, you know, saying no in the fact of like an agent calling with a pitch and saying, would you hear this? And I'm like, we don't do reality. This isn't right for us. Or a writer coming in for a general meeting and going, I have this passion project, show I'm dying to write. Is this right for Comedy Central? No, it's not. Or someone coming in and pitching me a show and like spending like, you can tell like it's their, like they're so excited to be at Comedy Central pitching a show, and they're pitching a show that some are bad, but some aren't. And like, it's like, you can tell the ones that have put so much time and effort into it. And then like at the end of the pitch, I never pass in the room, but like I have to call and say,
just knowing that you have to make
it's knowing that it's not right. And I mean like, so I think, you know, and then also like when you do get a TV show on the air, like having to be, you know, like being conscious of Slim Jim or KFC invest a lot of money into the show, so we can't talk badly about them. So there's a creative note that I have to give the creators or tell them a joke can't be in the script. And so like a network executive, it's your job to just be a bad guy.
Right.
Which is heartbreaking to me. And like for me, maybe I'm a masochist, but like being a producer, like people telling me no, like pushes me to like want to succeed even more. And I just hate being that person who's like,
well, you're pushing people to succeed anymore. Then look at it that way.
but it's just like saying no to people all day long is like very upsetting to me. And I think also the most upsetting thing is like Comedy Central is such a specific target, which we can talk about more, but like it's such a specific brand and we do such specific things. I mean, we've opened up the aperture a bit. Like I think some of the shows that are on the air now probably wouldn't have been on when you when you were here back in the day. But like, you know, there'll be times where I hear a pitch and I'm like, holy shit, like this is a show. And like, I would watch the show and I know how, like I could be helpful in the development of the show. Like I know what notes I would give, or I know which way to steer the kind of creators. Or like you sit in a room from someone and like across from them, they like have the whole like 8 seasons of a show mapped out. And they're like, it's so in their brain. And like, you're like, I want to be a part of this, but I can't because it's not right for Comedy Central. It's too dramatic, or, you know, it's too broad, or, you know. And also the other thing I would say that's heartbreaking is like, you know, we do traditional development process, which we can talk about more if you want, but like, you know, we'll buy a script and then shoot a pilot and then, you know, so I think a lot of the network model is like buy a script to series and they skip the pilot. And I think the pilot step is one of the most important things because it's like you're finding the tone of the show and, you know, finding the like chemistry of the cast together. But like there'll be times where like I'll sit down in a general meeting with a writer and like hear an idea and go like, I want to buy that idea. And then I'll pair them with like a director, or like I'll introduce them to talent, and like, because I think for us, we are very talent driven. So like, you know, we don't do traditional pilots where we like cast from the ground up, although we've started to do that because the chemistry is not there the same way like Abby and Alana are like Broad City, like where like they've been performing together forever.
I love that show, by the way.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And sad to see it go. But so like, you know, I'll pair like a writer with a comedian and then like a director, and like we'll shoot a pilot, and it's something that I'm so passionate about, but we'll test it, and or like it's just not right for Comedy Central, and then we'll pass on it, and then it'll go to another network sometimes. And then like I can't be involved with like my baby, like, you know, something that I feel at least some ownership in.
Right. And it's not that you personally didn't like it. It's just
it just didn't fit
that target.
It doesn't fit to the Comedy Central.
Well, let me back up a little bit. So how did you get the job here?
So I basically just annoyed them until they let me interview. I basically, going back to the agencies, like it agents can be the most important people. Like agents are the first people to hear about jobs. So like when I knew I was ready to leave Temple Hill, like I knew I could be picky in terms of like, I just love my job and like I could be there forever because Marty and Wick are just like so like their father figure. Like they're just so nurturing. So like I knew I had time to look. So I looked for probably like 6 months before like this job opened up. Mm-hmm. I had a target of like a couple networks, Comedy Central being the number one, like that I really wanted to end up on. So like I basically I sat down with a bunch of agents and went like, hey, this is what I want to do. Will you let me know if jobs open up? And then also Kent Alterman, who is now president of Comedy Central TV Land and Paramount Network, who was the head of like president of development at the time, was at New Line, so knew Marty and Wick a little bit. So like I also used Marty and Wick as a way to like call, because Marty, you know, at that time, I think we both knew like, you know, once you're
Did you tell him you were looking?
No, I mean once you're someone's assistant, you're always treated as an assistant in a way. And so like I think it got to the point where like after 6 years, it just like we both knew it was time. Like neither of us were willing to admit it. Mm-hmm. And so when this job opened up and I at least got like an interview, not with Kent yet, like I went to Marty and I was just like, listen, I love it here. Like I just think it's time. And like, here's the job, like, here's what I think I want to do. And like came to him as a mentor, more as like giving you an ultimatum that I'm getting a new job.
Right.
Like, and asked his opinion. And I think that went a long way as opposed to just going like, I'm looking for a new job. And so after sitting and talking for a while about like, here's why the pros and cons of going to a network, or here's what I think you should do next. Like he was like, I'm happy to call Kent. And so him and Wick called Kent Alterman.
Nice.
And I had 4 interviews here.
Wow.
I met with Jim Sharp, who was my old boss, and then met with some of the other team members, and then had to cover 3 pilots and 3 scripts. And then meet with Kent and then do another round of phone interviews.
Wow.
And so I think Kent at that time, you know, Workaholics was on the air. Broad City had just started, or they were about to pick it up. And so I think they were looking for someone with scripted background, like who worked in scripted narrative. Cause I think like a lot of the networks were going that way. And so they liked that was my background. And also I think they liked the idea of, cause again, it was like people were making the mass exodus to television all of a sudden, you know? And so they liked the idea that I had like feature relationships with producers and writers that I can maybe bring into the TV space.
Right. Very cool. So what did you get hired as?
Director of development.
Director of development.
And I was director for just shy of 2 years. And that was promoted to VP. And
Nice.
I've been here a little over 5 years.
So can you explain just like very simply, like what do you do? So you're a network executive at Comedy Central, and you talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago, but like what's your main job here? To handpick the brightest and best comedians and find out what is the best, who's ready for television, and basically figuring out and surrounding them with the right people to get their voice and put them in the best vehicle for their talents on television. So it's my job to make television, like find TV shows that are going to be hits. Like that's like the right. Boil it all down.
So, you know, I do that by meeting with writers, meeting with producers, meeting with agents, and, you know, taking meetings with writers, reading scripts, taking pitches, and figuring out which ones feel like they speak to that. But also a lot of it was going to comedy clubs and like seeing like tracking comedians from like, you know, someone who's been doing it for 2 years to the point where like maybe they are ready to make the leap to television. And so I think with Comedy Central, we're all about building talent. Like it's the most important thing is like, who is the comedian? What is their point of view? And how is that best utilized for television? So like there'll be comedians that we've been tracking for a year or two and we'll go, wow, they've really honed their craft. Like, you know, you see them at like the West Side Comedy Theater, or you see them at the Improv, and like they'll be hit or miss. And then you'll see them a year later at like a comedy festival, like Just for Laughs or something else. And you're like, holy shit, like something just clicked and like they're at the top of their game. And now's when we need to like, and if we've done our job correctly, like we'll already have developed with them or like worked with them in some capacity. Cause I think the pipeline really usually goes like this, like, well, this is a comedian we like and we want to be in business with. So a lot of times we'll do something in digital with them. Like we use digital, like our digital feeds a lot as like a low risk, high reward pilot step, like where we'll do like someone has an idea for a TV show. We're not quite sure it has legs enough for television. So we'll give them a digital series where like we do like 3 5-minute episodes as like a low risk, high reward pilot step. And so like we'll put it out there and see like how like our young guys on Twitter respond to it. And if it's successful, we'll do more. Or, you know, a young comedian will put them on a spot on like Adam Devine's House Party, which was like a stand-up, you know, or like a, you know, stand-up show we had. And like, or we have This Is Not Happening with Roy Wood Jr., which is like basically comedians telling stories based on a theme. And so like, we'll give them a spot on that. So like by the time someone has a television show here, they've probably been like, you know, done like a digital short for us, or they've done, you know, stand-up spot on one of our shows, or they've done a half hour. We do like, you know, Comedy Central, like Up Next, you know, like, which we shoot in New Orleans, where it's like, you know, like we pick 12 comedians to do like half hour specials. And then from there, like, holy shit, that person really rose to the top. Like we need to do a development step with them, and we'll bring them in and sit down with them and hear like what ideas they have. A perfect example of, you know, my job in a nutshell is we just greenlit a show with Aquafina, who was one of the leads in Crazy Rich Asians and was in Ocean's 8. And so we've been developing a TV show with her for 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
So she came to our attention when she was doing Girl Code for MTV. She was doing like bit parts on that show, and had just done a viral video called My Vag, which was like a music video. And so we saw this music video, and like just the energy on screen was undeniable. So we brought her in and we sat down with her, and we're like, you know, what do you want to do? Like, you know, and she was just like telling us stories. And at the time she had been working in an advertising agency, and she did the My Vag video that went viral, and the advertising agency fired her. And so like, we thought that and she has such a unique upbringing in the, like, you know, like in Queens, and like hearing like the impetus of the rap. And she was talking about like wanting to do a show about like a rapper with delusions of grandeur, like a la Kanye. And we're like, you know, like she has something there. So from that general meeting, we were like, we're going to buy a script. Like we're going to develop a script based on your like loosely based on your life. And at the time she had never written a script before. So like we then had to introduce her to like several writers who could work well with her, but then execute her life story on a page. And so we developed a script, and developing a script means like, you know, getting an outline, figuring out what story you want to tell in the pilot, doing several rounds of notes, and then having a final draft of a script. And we passed on it. It wasn't very good. But, you know, we still loved the process of developing with Nora, aka Aquafina. And we were like, she has something, like it's undeniable. We need to take another step. And this is development. Like this is why the development process is something. So like we, you know, had her meet another round of writers. And at the time she was developing with like a, you know, young male. We were like, maybe like pairing her with an Asian female, like, you know, who has a similar upbringing. And so from there we ordered another script and did another round of notes, which took another year. Wow. And then got a script where we're like, there's something there. And at the time, luckily it worked out that she had just gotten one of the, you know, just got
biggest movies in the world.
Exactly. And so now, you know, we shot a pilot and we picked up the series, and there's still tweaks to be made. Like that's why you shoot a pilot. Like you're figuring out what the show is.
Right. What's the show called?
It's called Aquafina.
Aquafina.
And so the writer's room starts in January, but like, that's, you know, that's kind of the development process in a nutshell of like, you know, like eyeing talent from like early on and knowing they have something and like trying a bunch of different things to get it there. But then I will say this, like, you know, I think the more important part of my job is when a show gets on the air, then making sure we're appeasing the master of Viacom, which means making sure we're able to sell Slim Jim or KFC or Taco Bell in the show. So doing in-show integrations where our comedian eats the Taco Bell and goes, I love Taco Bell. Or like doing a piece of content like that lives outside the show of like basically a commercial with the talent. So it's making those asks to talent and explaining to the talent why we need to do so. Never forcing them to do anything. We're very talent friendly here at Comedy Central. Also, like if they're, you know, in terms of scripts, stories that might piss off the corporate overlords.
Right.
Like I work on a show which I'm very proud of called Corporate, which is the second season premieres January 15th after Drunk History. And that show is all about like working at a soulless corporation. So it's cathartic for me working at Viacom. But like, you know, the pilot story that the guys wanted to tell was like basically like a Sumner Redstone type, like media mogul, like,
right.
you know, who's having sex with prostitutes. And I was like, God, like, I was like, Viacom cannot like put this out. Like maybe season 3 or 4, but like for a pilot and your first foot put forward, like we just can't do this.
Yeah.
And explaining why, the process that it's going to take to get a show on the air, and like the CEO is going to see it, and like why we can't do that. But like it is also really, you know, tough, like, because it's like, you know, we never give notes on jokes. Like that's just, was like comedy's so subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And also like we're working with some of the most talented comedians. So like who am I, who've never done stand-up comedy, to say like this joke isn't working? But like it's our job of explaining why, who our audience is and why our audience is going to watch it or why they won't, and helping make the script or the show something that like our young guys or our core audience is going to tune into.
Right. So you guys don't split things up here from between development and current. So
no, which is great. Because I think, you know, some networks they'll develop a show from the ground up, and then when it's picked up to series, they'll hand it off to a current executive.
Right.
Like ABC and all of those do
Zach
that.
Olin talked a lot about that in his
did.
episode. Yeah.
And I think for me, I would not want to work at a place that does that, just because like it's your baby. Like you have such a, like, it's such a sacred relationship with a comedian, like the comedians who created the show, that then handing it off to someone else, like the circle of trust, like, is broken. Same way you talked about, like, I think it was with Andrew Wontalk on his episode about like the cast of Vanderpump Rules trust you. Like,
right.
Like there's a trust, like they're willing to open up to you about things. You forge this relationship. If like you were on season, like the pilot of a show or season 1, and then hand it off to someone else, like the cast would probably revolt, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's hard. And I think that, I mean, we do different types of television, but like obviously like everything is relationship based. And so, yeah, if you can build a relationship with talent, in my case, it's a, you know, reality person, in your case, it's a writer or comedian, you know, then that process going forward, I think, is easier if you guys have that close relationship, and you know, the trust is there.
And then also what I love about Comedy Central is we are the studio and the network. Like a lot of times, like we're the production entity, where like a lot of networks will like buy a show from like NBC Universal, or like, and they'll produce the show, and then like we're just giving notes on cuts.
Right.
Like for us, we basically are on the ground floor, like basically producing the show with the talent. Like a lot of times we do have like non-writing EPs on the show, or like, you know, third-party production companies, or like, you know, talent-based pods, but like there's no real producers on the show. And so like for me, that's really like, it's exciting.
Right. So you are a producer, I'm
feeling needed. It's stroking my ego that I feel needed on the show.
What other shows do you cover? Because you cover the Jim Jefferies Show too, right?
So the 3 shows that I have on the air that I can talk about are Corporate, Jim Jefferies Show, which is like a weekly topical, you know, rip from the headlines news show, all like Daily Show or like Samantha Bee. And then Aquafina is going to be on the air. And then I have about, I would say like 3 or 4 pilots that I'm working on. So shows that, you know, like we've either gotten a script or it's a format that we're trying out, and we've committed to shooting a pilot. And, you know, we don't have like a pilot season of sorts, but so like have like about 4 pilots, and then usually have like 3 or 4 or 5 like pieces of development, which means like scripts that I'm like working on with like writers to hopefully get to the point of pilot. So, you know, it's
cool. You have something like in all stages of,
and I think, you know, like with like Jim Jefferies and Corporate, like Jim Jefferies is now going to be in its 3rd season. Like I've gotten the show off the ground and running. And
did you develop that one?
Yeah. So the way Jim Jefferies worked was like, Jim Jefferies is, you know, I know I've heard the story about the improv and the experience.
Yeah. Listen to Andrew Wontalk's episode. He's a producer.
I love that
Jim
story.
Jefferies.
And I'd also love to hear like Jim's version of telling that story.
He's told it on, he told it on Jay Moore's podcast. like a few days after it happened. And
I invited some of the Vanderpump Rules cast because I want to be best friends with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I've invited some of them to the Jim Jefferies Show taping because we tape Tuesdays at 1:00 in like Hollywood Center Studios, and like there's a great green room. Like you should come. I mean, anytime. Like
sure.
Great snacks, like booze. I mean, I don't partake because it's 1:00 on a Tuesday, but people do.
Yeah, sure.
But like I'm like it's a fun show to come see, and like Jim does stand up before, and they're like, he was such a dick that one time. And I'm like,
so him and Jax almost got into a fight, and then Katie went outside like after the whole thing and was like yelling at him on the sidewalk, and like I think now I think that everyone should be able to laugh about it. Like, who cares? Like, it happened. But
Jim makes fun of me quite a bit for how obsessed with Vanderpump Rules because like
really?
Literally that's all I talk about. Like, but when we're not talking about my career path, I just talk about Vanderpump Rules in every general meeting. That and 90 Day Fiance. No, so like with Jim, the way that show kind of worked was at the time he had pitched a scripted show based on like his experiences with his son about fatherhood, and it was just incredible, like hearing him he's a storyteller. Like he comes in the room and tells stories, and he's captivates you, and he's like leaves you like dying of laughter. But like what also was evident was like how astute he was in terms of like politics and like what was going on in the world, and like how sharp his point of view was and how different it was. And so at the time we were looking at developing 11:30, like the like what would go in for Colbert.
Right.
And so we were talking, and then also like Samantha B, we were looking, it was before political fatigue. And so we were looking of like, what can we do in that space? And like, what other foreigner? And like, so basically we were like to Jim, we love this idea, but like, we have a lot of scripted right now. Like, how would you be open to maybe developing like a weekly or a nightly, format? And yeah, he was really excited about that opportunity. So we introduced him to several like potential showrunners, because the showrunner really like has to get the show off the ground. Like, and so like, it's like that relationship between talent and showrunner is like the most important one, as you know.
Yeah.
And so like, it was important that he hit it off. And so we introduced him to a couple people. Scott Zabielski got the job. Scott's great. And then we also kind of then interviewed head writers together, because we all had specific ideas of like what that show could be. And so that show is I've never worked on a topical show like that weekly. Because scripted narrative, you shoot it and then it's in the can, and 6 months later or 8 months later it's on the air, and like you kind of forget about it. Like this is like you're making a TV show in a week. Like the script is not written until like 3 days before it shoots.
Yeah.
And so like with Jim, it's been interesting to see like what that show's evolved to, because like at first like there was a field piece component, but like they're huge international field pieces in scope, and like a lot of times you can't do that every episode. It's exhausting, because like Jim has a huge stand-up career as well.
Right.
So it's trying to figure out what that show should be, and like what works and what doesn't. We've now done 50 episodes of it.
I think you guys have nailed it too. Like I watched several episodes before I interviewed Andrew, because I had not watched it, and I really liked it. Like not blowing smoke. Like I was like, this is really well done. It's funny. It's current. Like he's just so dynamic.
My parents have hated everything I've worked on, but they like Jim Jefferies.
Yeah, he does this like very weird thing where he's like, he can be like so crass and offensive, and also like own his sort of like bad boyness so much, but like also be so likable.
Well, what I like about him is he is left leaning, but like he also has a lot of like right leaning thoughts. Like, and so he's not like, I feel like there's so much Trump bashing, and like we're Trump fatigue, and it is what it is. But like with Jim, like he'll sometimes make a point like that speaks to the right wing. Like I think, when the pilot got picked up, or when we did the pilot, he was bashing Hillary just as much as he was bashing Trump. And like all the points he made were spot on.
Yeah.
And he was like, listen, I didn't think Trump was going to win, and it would have been a show like bashing Hillary. And I think like what I think is needed with that show is like, it's a point of view in late night that we don't have. It's like the every like Jim's the kind of guy you want to get a beer with, and like like he sit down and like talk and give his opinion, and it's such a unique way. Like, and he'll say something that's so like feels off color, but then like show you like his work, like his the math,
Right,
and then
right.
like you're like, that's really smart, and like that's that spot on.
Yeah, he is a genius, and I was like so predispositioned not to like him because he mooned my cast and my cameras while I was filming Vanderpump Rules. But like, yeah, once I dove into his stuff, I'm like, yeah, this guy's awesome.
It's interesting too because like that show, like it's Jim Jefferies Show, so like we'll test the pilot and like ask people their thoughts on Jim, and like we do testing on all of our pilots.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the end all be all, but like it is an important piece to see like how like someone in Middle America likes this character or like responds to this comedian. And like as a network executive, I go to these focus groups and watch like these people who like have blue collar jobs, like watching the TV show, and like at times I find something funny and I'm like, this show's a hit, and then you go and it's like just doesn't, it feels so coastal and it doesn't land.
Right.
Like that's a really interesting like lesson for me as a like someone who wants to develop content. But like with Jim, like you then need to present the research to Jim. And it's like with Jim, it's like, it's him. Like the show is him. So it's like, if someone has like criticism like of the show, it feels like criticism of him. And so like, that's also a tough part of my job of like having to like, thread that needle of like, giving notes on like his comedy.
Right.
And that show, like what we'll do is we'll get the script on Friday and I'll read the script and like I'll circle stuff that just feels like it doesn't land on the script or feels like it's not a full thought. And then usually by Monday, Jim goes through it and has rewritten most of the script, and we'll get it Monday and I'll read it and I'll be like, a lot of things that I had issues with are already probably fixed. And if there's one or two things, like Tuesday we have rehearsal like in the morning and I'll see how it lands. And if there's a joke that I don't think lands, still isn't landing, like I'll talk to Jim about it and I'll be like, here's why I don't think it lands, or here's why I don't think the segment is quite working. And if he's like, you're right, sometimes he's right. He's like, you're right. And sometimes he's like, or him in the showrunner, like, I feel really passionate about this. You gotta trust me. You gotta trust him. I mean, so
that's cool. I want to start bringing this in for Langs. We've been going for a while,
Sorry.
Which is awesome.
I ramble.
No. I'm having a blast.
And I feel like we haven't even gotten enough Vanderpump Rules talking.
I know. I thought I was going to let you like ask me all your Vanderpump questions. Well, like you mentioned before, just like how specific of a target Comedy Central is. Can you share just like, just people may find it interesting, like what does Comedy Central look for? Like, what's the initiative?
Well, we have these kind of like, because we are corporate and we are like, we have brand filters. And I think if you look at and I'll tell you what the brand filters are, but if you look at the shows that we have on the air, they kind of touch all of these brand filters. And the first one's obvious, very funny. Like, I think, we'll get pitches that are things that are like dramedies or like, kind of funny, but like, have more serious undertones. And that's great for FX, but just probably not for Comedy Central.
Right.
Personally relevant is something we talk about. Like what is a way for the audience to like connect with those characters? If it's heart, or like what's the relationship like at the core that like people are going to like see themselves in? That's very important. And then like culturally relevant, like does it feel like a show that's now, or does it feel dated? And what's it saying? Like South Park's a perfect example of that. Like the commentary spot on, same thing with Jim. And then provocative, like, is it pushing the envelope? And I think we're not trying to be like, crass for crass sake. It's really just like, does this feel like something that hasn't been on the air before? Like, are we pushing boundaries and are we trying something different that feels like it's going to break through? And then we kind of have these like beachhead nights where like Tuesday night's our core audience night, which means like for a while our demo was like really like 18 to 34-year-old male, but like really 18 to 24 was our sweet spot. So like Tuesday night, we're really programming shows that speak to that. So like, Tosh, which is still running, speaks to like that demo. Jim works really well with Tosh. Drunk History is on Tuesday nights, although like that skews just as much female as male. And then Wednesday we call it our growth night, which means we're appealing to diversity, an older audience, never alienating our young core, but like trying to bring in new viewers. So like, like Broad City, which skews more female, corporate, which skews older. And then Friday is all stand up. Like we have a huge arsenal of like great stand up specials.
Do you guys still buy stand up specials?
We do, although
Netflix and HBO kind of taking that over.
It's getting hard to compete, but I will say like I think we've now been more aggressive about like doing overall deals with like comedians of like, you get a special and then we'll develop a show with you. And we also now like, there's a lot of corporate synergy with like Paramount. So now like we're trying to do more Comedy Central films and under Paramount. So like we now have those carrots to dangle to attract talent, where like we're not throwing as much money as Netflix, but like there's more upside in terms of like being able to check off a lot of different boxes, and comedians who like lose interest very quickly, like being able to do a lot of different things.
Right. Netflix is so crazy to me. Like, where do they get all this freaking money? Like, they're just like, they're making so much content. They did 365 stand-up specials.
I know, it's crazy.
365 days.
It's crazy
to produce all those and the movies. And
but we
shows.
are hearing a little bit like, and I think Netflix has, changed the game. And I think once Disney's streaming service gets in, like everyone should be scared. But I think, they've done such great shows, but like, I think it's getting to the point now where like there's so much that it's hard to find. Like, it's hard to find the show where like if you go on and discover something. But I think like the most challenging thing in our job, and this could be a whole other podcast, is like just like how people aren't watching TV on TV anymore. And so it's like, how do you combat that and like deal with that?
I am slightly terrified of like where TV's going, but I do think, hopefully, and people always say this, like if as a content creator, someone that like makes, whether it's a TV show or ends up on a digital platform, like that job, like that skill hopefully is going to always be needed, because just like where it ends up is kind of going to change, but like the fact that people want to watch stories doesn't change. So I'm hoping. Now,
question for you. I mean, I've listened to the podcast about like, your wife not wanting you to travel and be around and stuff like that. And you genuinely, the way you talk about your job, you light up and it seems like you love it and you're proud of the show, and you should be, because it's one of the best television shows out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
What is the next step for you? Like, what do you?
Yeah, I think I am on my way, I hope, to becoming a showrunner. So I want to take everything I've learned from working on Vanderpump Rules and all the other shows that I've done, take what I've learned from Bill Langworthy, the showrunner of Vanderpump Rules, who is the smartest man in Hollywood. And
a god in my book.
I mean, he worked on The Hills for 5 years. He did The City, which wasn't as successful.
Are you excited for The Hills reboot? Are you?
You know what's so funny about that? And I talked about this on the podcast that that'll have come out last week by the time this one is out. But that show is The Hills reboot is done by Evolution, same production company, and the crew is like almost top to bottom all Vanderpump Rules people. So the field producers, camera, audio, the PAs, a lot of the some of the post people. I mean, it's just like the whole it's a lot of Vanderpump Rules people that worked on the show. So I've heard a lot of stories and stuff, and I'm really interested to see it. I wasn't a Hills fan back in the day, so it doesn't like spark that excitement or nostalgia in me that it does for a lot of people. But they are interesting characters. They're interesting people. I think it's going to look really good. So we'll see what it turns out to be.
And I heard, because I'm also a fan of your podcast as much as I'm a fan of Vanderpump Rules. I heard you talk about like the rules of like, never creating drama. Like, like, do you have, in the way that we have brand filters, do you have like the rules to live by while you're making Vanderpump? Like,
100%. And it's not like a reality TV across the board. I think it's more of an evolution thing that they do on all their shows. And I think that it really works, and it works for, the longevity of a show, because when you have a cast that comes back year after year and you are so embedded in their lives, like they have to trust you. If they're worried that you're going to take something that they say or take their point of view and twist it or skew it somehow to like fit a story that like a producer came up with, then they're not going to be comfortable being open in front of the cameras with you, right? Because they don't want you to like make them do or say something that they didn't do or say. So trust is the biggest thing. So we never lie to our talent. Never. You can't like that. Like that would be
no. It's a kiss of death.
Yeah. But again, like there are plenty of reality shows. I mean, Bill Langworthy, he talks about like back in the day producing The Hills, where they'd be like, they would like lie to the cast to get them to like show up to parties and be like, is Brody in there? I really don't want to go in there if Brody's in there, be like, no, I don't think Brody's here tonight. Yeah, I think he might have been out of town. And then like as soon as they walk in, they're like, great, like cameras on Brody and who, you know, whatever. And we don't do that. Like we're very, very honest. I mean, you can always like not tell them something. You can be like, look, I really can't tell you that. Like, I'm sorry, I wish I could. But we don't lie to them. We don't let information travel. We don't act as the conduit of information. So like if a cast member tells me something, that it goes into like a producer vault essentially. And I will tell the other producers, but I will never tell another cast member. So there's two big reasons to that. One is that it's a trust thing, right? So if you tell me something, yeah, I'm going to talk about it in the office. We're going to talk about like how we maybe want to get that out on camera, but I'm not going to like go and like blow up your spot to like the person you're fighting with, or your or even your like husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. But then also because then like if we were to be the bearers of that information, then like we've become part of the story. So if you know, I'm just gonna make up bullshit, but like if Stassi tells me that she's upset that Kristen said something at dinner last night, and then I went and told Kristen that Stassi's upset with you because what you said last night, like it becomes a weaker story, because then Kristen, I don't get Kristen finding out on camera. If we want to know how Kristen found out, it has to involve production. So we always are trying to figure out how to track the movement of information between cast members, and getting that all on camera, as opposed to like letting that information come from producers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do your parents watch Vanderpump Rules?
I think they've watched it. I don't think it's like appointment viewing for them.
Two more questions for you.
Sure.
And then I know we have to wrap up.
I mean, these things can be as long as they want, right? Like, there's no like time limit to podcasts, but
we don't want to bore the audience. Pasta is code for drugs.
It really isn't, and I'm so amused that people think that. Like, it really, 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 I swear to God, is not code for drugs. That was just an example of James Kennedy having a short fuse, freaking out, and being James Kennedy. I mean, like what you saw on camera and what they talked about, like that's actually what happened. So James thought that Raquel and Logan were being dismissive of or making fun of Raquel. Lala's like, I took a bite, I ate her pasta or whatever, and that was just for whatever reason in James's like weird broken brain, that was a thing that like just like triggered him, and like it became not about the pasta. Like it wasn't that like Lala had like done Raquel's Coke or something like that. It really was pasta.
In your perfect world, what would be the last scene of Vanderpump Rules finale?
Oh my God, that is a really, really good, difficult question. That I've never actually thought about. I think literally just got chills like thinking about like the end of Vanderpump Rules.
But, I mean, I don't ever want it to end.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it goes on for years and years to come. And we were talking a little bit in before about like how that could potentially happen. I think that it would be something with like the whole cast like together, kind of showing like if even though the show's ending, these relationships are going on. So some kind of like nice group reflective moment where you see, because I mean at the core of that show, like that is a real group of friends. They are a family. Like they're hanging out right now. We're not filming. They're like vacationing together. They're like, you know, at each other's houses, like crying on each other's shoulders, and we're not getting any of it because we only film during the summer. So it's not, you know, they don't do it just for the cameras. They do it because it's their life. So, and I think that to me at least, more than the fighting, more than the cheating, like what makes that show really, really special is like that group of friends, that relationship. So I think it's something that would be them together, but then it would have some like irreverent or comedic note to it, like Jax would fart at the end or something, you know, something like
because I watched Kentucky. I watched the spinoff.
Oh yeah.
Is it going to be a wedding spinoff special, or is it just an episode of the show?
There's no plans for that. It's the plan is, and we haven't been officially ordered for season 8 yet.
It's a no-brainer that I would have met.
Well, yes, but it's like everyone assumes that it's happening. But it'll be Vanderpump Rules story, just like Tom and Katie's wedding was Vanderpump Rules story. And I actually went with Jackson Brittany to Kentucky a few months ago and like saw the venue, scouted it, met the people at the venue, and filmed a little like handheld footage of them like walking through the venue and everything. So I think it'll just live inside Vanderpump Rules.
I just keep coming up with questions. This is the last one, I promise.
No, dude, go ahead. I don't care.
Because like I remember like when Catfish became like in the zeitgeist, and it was like they were like Max and Neve were spoofed on SNL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a moment that you can point to where like you were like, holy crap, Vanderpump Rules has really broke through the zeitgeist? Like this is a cultural phenomenon.
It's well, early on, it was the first reality show that I'd worked on that all my friends were watching. So I was getting,
which is huge.
Yeah. Like I'd worked on a lot of shows leading before Vanderpump Rules that like, either nobody watched or like some weird obscure group of people were watching. This was the first show where I was like, it was on TV and people were my friends were texting me. My friends' wives were like calling me the next day and being like asking me questions about the show. So that early on was a thing that was like, oh wow, this is cool. This feels like something. And then it's really been in like the last year where it just feels like it's somehow broken through into, like you said,
is it Chrissy Teigen, you think, or is it?
I think that's part of it. I think like all the celebrities that talk about it and tweet about it, like Jennifer Lawrence and Chrissy Teigen and John Legend and Rihanna tweeted about it last year. It's like for us, like the people that make that show, like those are like such special moments. It sounds so cheesy, but like we print those tweets out and we like put them on the walls of our office.
You're doing God's work. You are.
I really am not. Some people would say I'm doing the devil's work, but then like getting nominated for an MTV award was like wait, what? Like before that, the only
People's Choice this year,
and then the People's Choice.
That was awesome.
Before that, like the only thing we'd ever been nominated for was there's like these reality TV awards, which are these kind of like low rent like award shows that they film at like some nightclub in LA and like broadcast on the internet, which we won, which we were excited about. So to be nominated for like real like because at the MTV Awards, I mean, we were like in the same building as like the fucking Avengers, and like like that's.
I was there.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't go.
I had a really terrible seat, and all I wanted to do was be seated near the Vanderpump.
This is like I didn't go to that because I was out of town. The showrunner and our main talent producer Jenna went to that, and then at the Producers' Choice Awards, they wouldn't even give us tickets they gave the cast tickets. They wouldn't give the producers tickets. And it was produced by E!, which is an NBC Universal.
It's unbelievable.
Network. And our PR contact, this girl Paige, who's awesome. She was just like, I'm trying so hard. I think it was like they knew we weren't going to win, and so like they were like packing the.
Besides using this podcast as a way to reconnect with Michelle Williams,
right?
What is your greatest abuse of power from producing Vanderpump? Getting people free goat cheese balls? Or
I don't even do that. I mean, people hit me up and they're like, "Hey, can you get me a table at Sir? Can you get me a reservation at Tom Tom?" It's like, just go on Open Table, like, or show up. Like, it's not like some like exclusive place. I've done like a few favors for people that not like just like. Some people will like ask, oh my God, could you get one of the cast of Vanderpump Rules to like film me a little video so I can like play it for my friend group or something, and I'll do that. And the cast is very receptive to that, and they'll normally do it for me.
My abuse of power is stupid. It has to do with reality. Is just is like for Christmas this year, I reached out to like agents and got like, because we've been on like a Real Housewives of Beverly Hills kick, and I had like I bought all the books and I had each housewife personalize their book to my wife. Like so it was like Kyle Richards wrote like to Claire, like from one housewife to another. Brandy Glanville was like to Claire, Mary fucking Chris. Like it was really cool.
That's awesome. Well, if Stassi her book is coming out I think in April. So if you need a signed copy of Stassi's
I'll go to the Barnes & Noble and wait in line and get it signed.
I'll get one for you. Don't worry about it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
I got one more question.
Yes,
no, I'm the host. I wrap this up, Adam. Come on. So I'm asking everybody this, like, what advice would you give people that are starting out now? Obviously, you know, your story of like writing people handwritten letters and just like reaching out to people that worked on movies and TV shows that you liked, worked for you, and you're doing great. What like
debatable
people getting in now? What would you say to them? How do they?
I mean, I think I have two little small nuggets. The first one is like go the extra mile, and that might sound cliche, but like, you know, the way that I wrote handwritten letters, like I get people reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and it's like a form letter. Like, and it's a lot of times they forget to even like delete the last sentence that's like they meant for someone else.
Right.
And like that thing goes noticed. Is like, just like, and also there's times where like we'll have someone who's interning here and like I'll ask them to do something and they'll do the bare minimum. And it's those people who do like go the extra mile that like pay attention, like, you know, who like I want to help.
Yeah.
And then I think like the other thing that I always tell to people, and I think when I was starting out, I was very guilty of, is like never judge your career on when anyone else is. Like everyone moves at their own pace. And so like when my friends, like when I was at CA or like I was an assistant, my friends were getting promoted and I'd be like, why me? Like, why not me? And like, you can't, everyone goes at their own pace and people figure out what they're like meant, like their career path is meant to be at different like times. And so like, I think if you're coming from a place where you're judging your own success on other people's, it's a slippery slope, and you're never going to get ahead that way.
That is great advice. Do you remember? Can you think of one piece of advice that you were given at some point in your career that stuck with you?
Yeah, I say this to my assistant occasionally, and he doesn't understand. And I say it multiple times: is never be the ping pong ball, be the paddle. Which means like, just get it, like never be that, like you want to be the person driving the conversation. You always want to be in the lead. You never want to be the person who's like chasing to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And where for me, like when I was an assistant, is like I would like setting a meeting, something as simple as setting a meeting, like it would always be like what other people's of it. Like I would never take the lead. And I found that once I started taking the lead and I was more like not aggressive, but like more like gung ho on like just getting it done and what's best for my boss or what's best for me.
Right.
I found that like it was night and day, and it like was so much more time and cost effective.
Yeah. Have you ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
No.
It's like this nerdy personal finance book or whatever, but he says something similar. He's like, life is going to push you around, like always, for the rest of your life. It's not going to change. So it's like, unless you learn how to push back, like you're never going to succeed. It's kind of similar.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I talked about this in one of the episodes. I can't remember, but I had someone very early on in my career tell me, eliminate the words job description from your vocabulary. So
that's a great piece of advice.
Don't, like, if you are hired to do one job and someone asks you to do something else, don't be like, oh, that's not part of my job description. It's like, you're there to help. You're there to add value. You're there to like make everyone else's lives around you easier, make your boss's lives easier, and just contribute to the overall, the overall product of whatever it is you're making. So don't get stuck in this like mindset of like, oh, I'm only here to do this. Like that's someone else's job. I think that's
I heard also dress for the job you want, not the job you have. That's why I'm dressed like a janitor today.
Very good. Well, thank you. I'll wrap this up now.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, dude, really, this has been so fun.
And continue doing God's work.
Thanks so much, man. All right, that was Adam Londy, Vice President of Talent and Development at Comedy Central. What a great guy. I really enjoyed our chat. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you are enjoying these podcast episodes, do me a big favor. Go on to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen and rate it, subscribe, leave a comment. It really is a big help to the show. If you want to reach out to me, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram. It's Working Class Hollywood. Or shoot me an email. It's show, SHOW, @workingclasshollywood.com. Thank you to everyone that continues to listen to the show. Stay tuned for more episodes every week. I've got more great interviews on the way. Thank you so much. I will see you next time.